The NBA's trade deadline is just one short week away, and with that being the case, the rumor mill is heating up, and we seem destined to see some big moves go down. Some teams need major changes, while others only need a minor move in the margins, and all of that brings us to today's video. We actually started on this topic in my last video, so be sure to go watch that after you watch this if you missed it. But we're going through all 30 NBA teams, picking out the player that is either most likely to be traded or the player that just needs to be traded before the deadline this year. Last video we went through the teams in the Eastern Conference, so in today's video we're finishing up with the teams in the Western Conference. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but it also very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. Going in alphabetical order, we'll start with the Dallas Mavericks, and the player they're most likely to trade is Richaun Holmes. Holmes is the 5th most expensive player on the team's payroll, and he doesn't even regularly play in the rotation. With the emergence of rookie Derek Lively, he's incredibly expendable, and his contract will likely be needed to make the money work in any offer where they go after a difference maker for the remainder of the season. Next up is the Denver Nuggets, and the player they're most likely to trade at the deadline is Zeke Naji. The Nuggets are a team that seems pretty content with what they have, as they're the reigning champions within a game of first place in the West. They've got the continuity of the same starting lineup that won it all last year, they've found a good groove with their current bench rotation, and after being paid a somewhat lucrative contract extension this summer, Naji has already fallen out of the team's rotation, so it would be in the best interest of both the team and Naji himself to move him to a place where the pressure isn't as high and he can actually play. Next is the Golden State Warriors, and the player they need to trade before the deadline is Andrew Wiggins. The Warriors are having an old versus young crisis right now, with a lot of their younger talent blossoming while simultaneously being held back by the washed veterans ahead of them. Andrew Wiggins is having the worst year of his entire career, and still has 3 more years on his current contract, which is only going to look worse as time goes on. The sooner they move on from him, the better off they are, because players like Jonathan Kuminga and Brandon Pajemski are already more effective in the same role, and the Warriors are running out of time to turn their season around, currently sitting in 12th place in the West standings. Next is the Houston Rockets, and the player they might need to trade before the deadline is Jalen Green. This one is going to seem like a bit of a bombshell, but recent reports are saying that the Rockets are looking to make win-now changes under coach Ime Udoka, and Jalen Green is a piece that is no longer off the table. The Rockets started the year red hot, but have now slipped all the way down to 11th place in the West standings, and they fully intend on fighting for a playoff spot from everything I've seen. Jalen Green is frustrating because some nights he shows you flashes of an elite scoring talent in the making, but he is way too inconsistent to be relied upon as a go-to guy, and his poor defense and decision-making make him an option to move in a deal where they potentially go hunting for a real star player. Up next is the Los Angeles Clippers, and the player they're most likely to trade before the deadline is PJ Tucker. Tucker has been a part of the package deal with James Harden for years, and he came to LA once again included in the James Harden trade, but after early season struggles, the Clippers removed him from the rotation almost entirely and immediately began finding success, so he hasn't really seen the court all that much since. His contract isn't that enticing for teams to take on, but he's a player with championship experience and is a good locker room presence, which could get a team to want to bring him in if the Clippers aren't using him. Next up is the Los Angeles Lakers, and the player they need to trade before the deadline is D'Angelo Russell. The Lakers, to put it simply, are well behind where they believed they should have been at this point in the season, currently under 500. LeBron James's patience is running thin, and we all know what usually happens when that's the case. A big trade goes down. D'Angelo Russell hasn't necessarily been bad this year at all, actually shooting the ball well, all things considered, but he is clearly the trade chip that the team is dangling in front of other teams and offers, and it seems inevitable that he finds a new home. Next is the Memphis Grizzlies, and the player they're most likely to trade before the deadline is Zaire Williams. Williams was a top 10 pick back in 2021, and to put it simply, he has not panned out. Through 3 seasons, you would expect to see meaningful progress made by prospects with raw athletic talent, but at this point in time, that's still all he really is. The Grizzlies' season may be lost this year, but they're going to be looking to get right back into the mix next season, so if they can get ahead of the curve and move Williams for something that could actually help them next season, they should do that. Next is the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the player they're most likely to trade is Shake Milton. The Timberwolves are another team sitting at the top of the standings, pleased with what they already have. I don't necessarily think they're going to make a move, but if they do, then Milton would be the piece used in some offers to find an upgrade along the edges. The team was hopeful he could provide an impactful scoring threat off the bench, signing him this offseason, but he has just not been able to find a groove this year at all, shooting the ball pretty poorly most nights, and he doesn't even play that often. So if his $5 million contract is movable, then they will take advantage of it. Up next is the New Orleans Pelicans, and the player they're most likely to move by the deadline is Jonas Valanciunas. This isn't a case of Valanciunas being bad or holding the team back at all, it's more just a case of the Pelicans being in a position where they probably need a more defensive-minded center holding things down in the middle, which isn't necessarily where Valanciunas' value shines. His $15 million expiring contract also sets him up perfectly to be in the middle of any offer they make to find an upgrade at the position, as it makes the money work and he's talented enough to garner interest. Next is the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the player they're most likely to trade is Davis Bertans. The Thunder are in one of the best positions in the league right now, sitting in second place in the Western Conference standings, while also having an entire treasure chest of draft capital and assets at their disposal to throw in a trade. They could go star hunting with all of the first round picks they have to offer, and if they're going to do that, then Davis Bertans and his $17 million contract need to come off the books to do it. Next up is the Phoenix Suns, and the player they're most likely to trade is Bol Bol. The Suns have used up all of the assets they had in order to form the big three of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, so any trade they make will be less notable. Bol Bol was brought in to potentially get his chance to earn minutes off the bench backing up Jusuf Nurkic, but he's once again failing to break into the rotation, so we could see him on the move yet again. Next is the Portland Trail Blazers, and the player they're most likely to trade at the deadline is Malcolm Brogdon. Brogdon came to Portland as a result of the Jrue Holiday trade, and the assumption was always that his time there would be short. He's once again proving his worth on this rebuilding Blazers team, and is exactly the kind of experienced veteran ball handler and playmaker that playoff teams would die to have in their rotation, so I expect many of them to come calling the closer we get to the deadline. Up next is the Sacramento Kings, and the player they're most likely to trade at the deadline is Harrison Barnes. The Kings have been involved in trade discussions for upgrades at the forward spot a few times already, with the most recent example being them expressing interest in Pascal Siakam before he went to Indiana. So where there's smoke, there's typically fire, and while Barnes has been fine in the role that he's in as a member of the Kings, there's definitely room to improve, and the Kings don't want to lose the momentum that they built after breaking into the playoffs last season for the first time in 16 years. Next up is the San Antonio Spurs, and the player they may look to trade at the deadline is Keldon Johnson. Johnson has developed well in his 5 years in San Antonio, but with the team moving him to a bench role due to his inconsistency and inefficiency, there are real questions being asked about whether he's a part of the team's long-term plans alongside Victor Wembanyama. He signed a contract extension that lasts 3 more years, but his salary actually decreases gradually, which makes it more team-friendly as it goes, so if there's a team out there looking for a volume scoring option, the Spurs may ship him out if the offer is good enough. And finally, the last team in the West is the Utah Jazz, and the player they're most likely to trade before the deadline is Jordan Clarkson. Once again, Clarkson fits the mold of an older, volume-scoring talent playing on a younger team that is expected to attract offers from playoff teams. Clarkson's not necessarily having his best season this year either, and Colin Sexton recently took his starting job, so with him still under contract for 2 more years, they may look to unload him early. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below who you think is about to get traded. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.